It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Albert Meyer. We're here in your beautiful apartment in Netanya in Israel. And Albert, you come originally from Denmark. You were born in Denmark.
Correct.
So if you can...
I was born in 1950 in Copenhagen. And from my parents' side, they both were born in Copenhagen also. And my grandparents from my father's side was born in Copenhagen. My mother's family is half Danish and half German. My grandmother from my mother's side came from Berlin in 1922 to Denmark.
And did you grow up in a religious family or traditional?
I grew up in a traditional religious family, yeah. Not traditional Jewish family. You didn't have, on that time, the big difference between religious family and traditional. It was all the same synagogue. There was a very small synagogue of Machzika Hadass, but the main Orthodox lineage was in the big synagogue.
And you have pictures of your parents?
Yes.
If you could show us.
Here I have a picture with my parents and little me.
And that's when you were...
Very small. Maybe half a year or something like that.
And this is your home in Copenhagen. And when were your parents married?
In 1948. So after the war.
And Albert, can I ask, did your parents, they must have discussed with you how they survived and what happened during the war with the rescue?
They have not discussed a lot, they have talked a lot.
They talked a lot?
Yeah. They talked a lot about it, and they told about how difficult it was and how they came to Sweden. The thing is that it was just before Susono, and my father and his father, my granddaddy, was in the synagogue in the morning, and the rabbi informed the synagogue from the shulchan that, dear friends, please be aware there will be no service tonight, and you should leave your homes as soon as possible and as quick as possible because of what will go on. And so my daddy came home with his father, and they lived in the same building. And they called around to everybody who they knew and said, dinner tonight is cancelled. Don't ask about why. Just get away as quick as possible from Copenhagen, from Denmark. Nikoda.
Can I just ask, do you know who told the rabbi, who warned the rabbi?
I don't know exactly how the connection was, but obviously there was a man called Mr. Dukwitsch, who was German, who was not in the position to be very against the Jews, and he informed, it seems, the community of Copenhagen, of the Jewish community in Copenhagen, that something would happen. He did not say what, he said something will happen on Rosh Hashanah. So the community called the chief rabbi and said, we have got that and that message from somebody, didn't mention who, and please inform the community to disappear. The thing is that my dad and my mom didn't know each other so well. He had a job in a company where he had a bank account, a bank connection, and his bank connection was den danske Landmandsbank. And in this bank was a girl sitting in the expeditions room, and she came to my dad and said, Mr. Meyer, can we talk for 4 years, 4 eyes? And he said, yes. And she said she had heard that it was on time to leave, and he should get out of the country and get out from everything within very short time. That means she knew already about it. From where she knew, I have no idea. And then he came home, packed what he could take with him, a few things, and his sister and his mom and his dad all left in the afternoon. On the other side of the street was the back entrance to not the main post office, but the second biggest post office. And there was a very pro-Jewish security guy. And my granddaddy went to him and said, see you later, I don't know when. We are leaving. And then they left, and at the train station to go out from Copenhagen, they met with the chief rabbi. By accident, they were going on the same time, and they didn't want to talk with each other. My granddaddy had a big beard, and the chief rabbi were running around with a hat on and I don't know what, looking like a rabbi. And he was there with his wife and his children, and my granddaddy with his wife and children, so they disappeared. And then they came to a little town out of Copenhagen where they had planned to be picked up by somebody from a company. And this company was run by a brother to a farmer. And the farmer has just got the message there would come some Jews from Copenhagen to you. Stop. So it was holiday, it was Rosh Hashanah, and the farmer people had made a nice big meal, alles fleischig, alles non-kosher, and the Meyer family had a big problem because they could not eat Chaserfleisch, and they said, sorry, we cannot eat the meat, but we will take potatoes and vegetables and things like that. And the children, which was no children, they were youngsters. My daddy was born in 1913 and my aunt 1916. So they were young. And they looked at him and said, why can't we eat the meat? And he said, if you are hungry, you eat the meat. I will not do it. I cannot. I don't know if they did it. Anyway, they were there a few days, and then they were picked up from a car and was driven with closed windows on the cars to a place outside Copenhagen. They didn't know where to go. And they came to a small port, small harbor, And there they was brought to a family, and the family there was organized with many other families around on the shore, other friends. And then in the night they were walking down to the sea, and then they could see and hear there was a boat coming in. And of course the boat came to pick up the Jews, but they didn't know the shipper, they didn't know who has paid for it, they didn't know how much has been paid, they didn't know anything officially. So my daddy told later that they had made an arrangement with the company where he was boss, that they should bring some money in an envelope to somebody to pay for some of us, some of the family, to come to Sweden. I don't know how much, I don't know how many people was on the boat. It was more than just our family. And they came to Sweden the next day. They were sailing the whole night, and in the middle of the sea they stopped, and everybody was very, very insecure and was very afraid what was going on. And they were not up on the ship, they were all downstairs in the bottom, not getting anything to eat, not getting anything to drink except what they had with them. And after some time they began sailing again, and when they came to the Swedish coast, outside the coast, they were told that now they could come up on the ship and see where and what. It was light, and it was another atmosphere, it was an open country, and they understood they were in Sweden.
Do they know why the boat stopped in the middle of the...
It seems that they were told, I don't know it, but it seems that somebody has said that they stopped because in the surrounding there was a ship with Germans, and they didn't want to make noise and from the motor and so on, so they had to stop and to go out of light and to be blind, so to say. Then they came to Sweden and should registered in the Swedish system as refugees, of course. Everybody should tell who they were, what was the birthday date, and where were they born, and from where did they come, why did they come. All these important questions, but in that situation, nonsense. But the people was very friendly, and they were asked if they knew anybody in Sweden, and they knew somebody in Malmö, and they were said, okay, you can go to them and say you are here, and then they can help you and take over.
And were these relatives in Malmö?
There was a half cousin to my father in Malmö, and this Swedish family, which was half Swedish and half Danish. He was Swedish, she was Danish, was not especially open for helping. They said come in, and they said sit down, you get a glass of water if you want. And then they said yes, now you must find out where you will live. And they said yes, but we have to find our way around, and we don't know anybody and so. But Little by little, they found a place to live and to get organized. My father was a goldsmith. He has been making gold arbeit, rings and bracelets and all this kind of stuff. And it was October. So he was looking in the newspaper if he could find a job. My granddad didn't want to work. He had a good job in Copenhagen. He was not interested in going to work. My grandmother was not interested because she preferred to stay home with him. He was not so well. He had heart problems and things like that. And so my father found a job north of Stockholm and went up there with the train and talked with the boss, and he began to work. Found a little room to live in, once in my apartment or a room in an apartment, I don't know what. Anyway, the family lived in Sweden from October to May 45, and then they went back to Copenhagen. My mother's side was another history. My mother was my mother, my grandmother, and my granddaddy. Finished. They got married in 22. She came from Berlin. I don't know how they met each other. I have no idea. I know that when in 43, when they should leave from Denmark, they lived in 3 different times. My mom was working in the bank, and she went off and said, "See you later, alligator," and let out the door, and made an appointment with the bank, an agreement with the bank that she could come back, and the bank said, "Of course, you come back afterwards, and every month your salary will be paid into your account, so you get your monthly salary even if you're not here."
That's amazing.
But the thing is that the bank was, I will not say a Jewish bank, but there were many Jews directors earlier in the bank, and they had a big Jewish customer group and was very friendly to the Jews, so it was no surprise when we hear about and think about it today. They left from Copenhagen. My mom one day, my granddaddy one day, my grandmother another day. She worked in the Copenhagen town official thing, in an office where she was making I don't know what. He was doing something with insurances, and my mom was in a bank, and they came to Sweden and to different camps. There was some collecting camps outside Malmö.
How did they get to Sweden? Also with the boats?
Yeah. I don't know when. I don't know from where. They just came to Sweden. I never got that.
Was your mother only child?
No, she was born in 23, so she was about 20, something like that.
But did she have any brothers or sisters?
She was a single child.
She was a single child.
And my mom had a job in I don't know where. My grandmother got a job in Stockholm in the Swedish official system because she had been working in Copenhagen in the official system. And she lived in Stockholm. My mom lived in, I don't know where, somewhere in a small town in Sweden, between Stockholm and Malmö. And my mother's father, my granddad, he lived in Helsingborg. It is close to the coast, north of Copenhagen, across from Elsinore. And there he had an apartment and lived there. So they were totally teared apart, the family. But they came back to Copenhagen and found their old apartment, and it was, how I understood, not nice taken care of. Paintings were stolen and silver things was taken away and things like that. But the apartment stood there and they could go into the apartment and it was paid all the time. Nobody knows from where.
The rent was paid?
The rent was paid. And from my father's side, it was an apartment that belonged to the company where my granddaddy was director, so it was no problem.
And it was also, nobody had occupied the apartment during the war?
The parents from my mother's side, somebody has lived in the apartment. But when they got the message that the owners would come back in the next few days, they said, okay, we find out a place to stay, and they disappeared with some stuff.
They took some things?
Yeah, I don't know what. I never got the answer about. I never asked. So when they talked about it, when my daddy talked about it, it was mainly from his side. And my mom was very little talking about the whole thing. My grandmother from my mom's side, she talked a little bit about, but it was always very small information and small pictures that come out. I will see if I can find the picture of my grandparents, should be possible.
Oh, it's amazing. And can I ask that you have other family, Albert, that didn't leave, that remained in Denmark and were taken to Ravenston? Or do most of the family escape?
The most of the family escaped. There was a few uncles to my daddy who were taken to Ravenston. Here you have
We can.
my grandparents with me.
Is this on which side?
From my mother's side.
And the lady.
That was my father's mom.
Your father's mom. And on the top one, it's
my cousin.
And this picture over here.
This is my parents and me.
Your parents and you.
And that is my cousin and me.
And do you have any of your grandfather from?
I will see if I find in here something. I don't think so. Because he passed away before I got birth. No.
Okay, but these are wonderful pictures.
Yes.
And Albert, let me just ask, when you were growing up, did you ask your parents a lot about what happened with the rescue, or?
No. I didn't ask anything.
Is it because you didn't want to upset them, or you felt?
I think that when they wanted to tell me something, they did it. I should not need to ask more. So I didn't ask anything. When they started to tell, I could ask or complain and say, what happened, why and where. What I know was that my grandfather and his wife and my aunt from my daddy's side, they went to a farmer outside Copenhagen, and the farmer was not a regular farmer. He worked in a farm, but he was a farmakolog, altså apoteker. Doctor, an apoteker person, a pharmacy man.
Mm-hmm.
And
a chemist.
Chemist, or I don't know what. And he was very aware of what was going on. And the son of the family, my daddy found, I don't know where, through connections, and talked a few words with him and said he wanted to meet with him, and he didn't want to. And he was always against the parents' treatment of a Jewish family. So he can't have been anti-Jewish. I will not say anything less or anything more. But it was a big disappointment for my daddy. He couldn't meet with him and say thank you.
This was after the war?
It was in the 60s once, or end of the 50s. I knew my daddy wanted to say thank you, but he couldn't. The man didn't want to.
And Albert, can I ask, how did your parents meet?
As I said, they worked in the bank. My mom worked in a bank, and my daddy was going to the bank daily from his shop, from his company, bringing in checks and doing things in the bank with her. And there was, and there is still, a Danish youth group in Copenhagen, started in 1919. And this group of Jewish people, young people, it was youngsters, they made parties. In Sweden they have been able to do some parties together with the Swedish youngsters, Jewish youngsters. And they came back to Copenhagen and wanted to take up this activity again. And my daddy asked my mom if she had interest to meet some other Jewish young people. And they went together to this party, and she was not known by anybody, nobody knew her. And it was like that they started the relationship.
Did they ever meet in Sweden, when they were in Sweden?
No, I don't think so.
It's only when they came back after the war?
Yeah. Because they had no connection. I mean, she was sitting somewhere in, as I said, between Malmö and Stockholm. He was in Falun and Malmö, so no connection.
And you growing up in Copenhagen?
Yeah, after the war.
Did your family still remain traditional after the war?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they kept a kosher home? And
they kept a kosher household, and they My daddy had a wonderful job in the synagogue, and my mom had nothing to do with Jewish life. I don't say she was anti-Jewish, but she could not be anti-Jewish, but she didn't want to get involved. She just wanted to be herself, taking care of her family, living with the family. My granddaddy from my father's side had been in the community many, many years, even before the war. And I don't know what year he was Metratant Bereshit.
Oh.
And that says everything.
So it's a big honor. It's a tremendous honor.
And after the war, he was working in a silver company. And after the war, he gave the synagogue a Kiddush cup. And on this Kiddush cup stands gift from Mr. Albert Meyer, and then 1945, I don't know what now. But it is a very nice cup. They used it for many, many years, every Friday.
And it's still there in the synagogue?
It is still in the synagogue, yeah.
Wow.
My cousin, who you saw a picture of before, when he went to Basel to our wedding, he brought the Kiddush cup with him so we could use it for the Gruppe. And when there have been other celebrations in the family, other weddings in the family, he has got permission to bring it from the synagogue to use it. So there has always been a close connection. I was not so active. I was active in the Jewish world for some years, but I never got so much involved as he is.
And was your family very Zionistic?
Not really.
So how did you land up in Israel?
I was living in a house with my cousin. His parents, when he was very young, got divorced. He was about 3 or 4 years when they got divorced. And he and I lived in the same building, and we had not much connection with other youngsters. We knew, of course, there was a lot of youngsters. We saw them in the synagogue. And one or another day they said, "Why don't you come to Bnei Akiva?" And it was Sunday morning, so I could go. And it was in the community center, not far away from where we lived. And we walked to the community center, and it was very okay. And like that, I got into connection with some more people. And some years ago, I was on a Shiva meeting with some family here in Israel. And one of the ladies said, "Where are you living?" I said, "I'm living in Netanya." I found out she was living in a kibbutz in the south. And she said, "When do you come? When did you arrive in Israel? When did you make Aliyah?" I said, a few years ago. "Why so late?" And I tell her, "You know what? Don't scream at me. I'm sure you would understand there have been some reasons why I could not just go on Aliyah. So don't make me angry." And she never asked anything more. But she was my madrich. And after her was the rabbi from Copenhagen, who was my madrich, and him I have still connection with on email, on telephone, and things like that. So it is funny.
So I just want to ask, When you were at school,
Yeah.
did you go to a public school or was it a Jewish school?
Yes. I went to a private school first, where there was no good education. It was not easy for me.
But was it a Jewish private school or a general school?
A general private school. Then I went to the Jewish school for half a year, and they said that I was a noisemaker. So they kicked me out.
Oy.
And then I went to a local school from the government.
And growing up in school, did
Yeah.
you, part of the curriculum, did they speak about the Danish rescue of the
No
Jewish
idea
population?
anymore. No idea anymore.
It wasn't spoken about?
I
at
don't
all?
know. I don't remember.
And did any of the children, your friends, ask you
No.
about your parents?
No, no. We had very few, both my cousin and me, very few friends at home. Only Jewish friends. But non-Jewish friends we didn't see at home. Or very few.
Did you ever experience anti-Semitism growing up in Copenhagen?
I experienced something later.
But not when you were growing up as a,
No.
as a child?
Later I had some experience and it was not so nice. But my colleagues experienced the same situation as me. And they made things against the boss who was not nice to me. And he believed that it was me and made, instead of changing to being better, he got worse. So it was not so nice. Afterwards, when I stopped, a few years later, I heard that he had had a heavy time with illness and with hospital things and things like that. And the person who told me that said, he has Heine Marcus become, he has got his kick the way he has behaved against me.
Wow.
He passed away and was for a long time very sick.
So Albert, I want to ask you, with Denmark stands out. It stands out amongst all the nations as really possibly the most unique country that really went out of its way to save the Jewish population. If you look in the Shire, there's no country like Denmark.
I don't agree. If you look what happened in Ungarn, I think it was, there was some kind of help also.
But not to the extent of Denmark.
No, but because they had not the chance. They had Germany all over.
But my question to you is, why did the Danes go out of their way to save the Jews? Because it's quite remarkable what happened in Denmark.
I will say it like this. Since 1914, there has been made the king made a declaration in 1814, saying that the Jews should be accepted as Danes and should be treated and should be dealt with as Danes, not because they were Jewish, but because they were Danish. And that means that the Danish population did not look at the Jewish population as something special. They were Danish and they worked with Danish and they had same salary and what do I know. There were no anti-Semitism, no problems. And of course, when a fellow from the office besides or my boss or what do I know, have a problem, we help him.
Yeah.
So they helped.
The other amazing thing is that what you mentioned is that the homes, although they took things out of the homes, but in many other countries the homes were occupied.
There were also homes who was destroyed.
But a lot of the homes, the people that I've spoken to, they came back and they could go back into the homes again. In many other countries, the Jews were forbidden from going back into the homes. They were chased out and they could never ever go back again.
Mm-hmm. I have heard about that, but I don't think that was the case in Denmark.
And Denmark was very special. It was. Do you feel very proud of what happened in Denmark?
No. I think if I would have been born during the time, but I'm from 50, so I'm born after all these things, and that maybe is the reason why I don't have the same feeling. On the other hand, living in Netanya, living in Israel, we are now trying to start up doing something about some kind of arrangement in 2023 because of the 80th years of the trip to Sweden.
Of the rescue.
Of the rescue. And we are now starting talking about what we will do and what we can do here in Israel, the Danish groups. Here are 3 Danish groups, or 2 Danish groups and me. I'm representing a Danish club for, how can I say, people who comes from Denmark and moved out to work somewhere or to do something called Danes Worldwide. And this is a non-political organization, and many Danish people live in Israel, and some of them have been members in this organization or has family who are members, and then there are 2 other clubs or groups, and we work together, these 3 groups, to do things together.
Well, please God, it's going to be. You're right. It's in 2 years' time.
Yeah. What we have discussed until now, we had one meeting at the embassy in Tel Aviv where we talked about what do we start to do, and I said, I don't know what you want to do. In principle, I am born after, so I have not the same feeling as you have. One of the club's persons who was there was born in Sweden, I think, and he has part-time part of his family is from Sweden, and the other person is a Danish girl that had converted to Judaism, and she also had some family who was priest and things like that, so they had some connections. Me not. So what I did, I suggested that whatever we do, I think we should make, if not one, then maybe a few podcasts in English, in Danish, in Hebrew, and send them out to the schools in Israel, talking about the rescue of the Danish Jews and things like that.
I agree.
Because it is important also here in Israel that you know about it also when you're young.
I agree totally. It's so important. I just want to thank you so much, Alvin. I'm going to just come in. So I just want to mention I am so grateful to you, and I really want to thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
And I have such admiration for what happened in Denmark. I see it as a unique. The Danes really they excelled in their humanity and in they really went out of their way. The King of Denmark, the stories, it's so inspirational. And if only other countries would have followed what Denmark did. But you can be very proud of your ancestry and your family, and it really is remarkable. So I want to thank you so much.
I will tell you something. This is from the Danish Jewish Museum in Copenhagen. From the front of the homepage. Here you have Safe Haven. It is a link to a database. And this database has, I don't know how many hundreds of people from the Jewish community who lived in Sweden during the time and have all the documents registered and things. It is interesting for you to look at it also.
Thank you so much. So Albert, really thank you so much, and I'm so grateful to you.
I have another question what is out of this thing. It is about the Bulim.
So I just want to mention on the Bulim, there is a stamp.
I know.
Which I'll end. First of all, there's Israeli stamp with the boat rescue, and there's a Danish stamp lighting Shabbos candles.
I know.
So, kol hakavod. Really, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
In 1973, the Israel Postal Authority issued a stamp to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the rescue of the Jews from Denmark. In 1984, the Post and Telegraphic Office of Denmark issued a commemorative stamp on the occasion of the 300th anniversary of the establishment of the Jewish community in Copenhagen. And there's a stamp of a Jewish woman lighting the Shabbos candles with the challah and the wine. A commemorative cover was also issued on the 5th of October. This philatelic cover was autographed by the artist Marine Nagler and the Chief Rabbi of Copenhagen, Bent Melchior. There was a limited edition of 100 covers.